Yes, that's right. When your party TPKs in Pathfinder, D&D, or any other tabletop RPG, it's your fault. 100% your fault. And I'm gonna give you 5 reasons total party kills are your fault because I'm nice like that. Number 1, splitting the party. All right, let's start off with the most obvious one, shall we? Get Captain Obvious out of the way. Never split the party is one of the most common sayings in RPGs that almost every player recites daily just to make sure it stays top of mind, and yet it happens time and time again in like every game session that my players are like, I think we should split up. And then, a heated discussion occurs with players going back and forth about why they should or should not split up. Usually they decide not to, but what tickles me is that they are actually considering it. Like every time, it's a legitimate consideration that they are debating. And my players know that when they split up, I'm not going to adjust anything in the adventure or encounters just because there are only 2 characters when they come across an encounter designed for a group of 5 characters. For me, personally, that would just break verisimilitude if I adjust things on the fly to account for them splitting up. A dungeon is the way a dungeon is, and the reality of that dungeon is not going to be affected by player decisions. I mean, at least this sort of decision. I will also say that I have had some amazing game sessions where characters have split up and encountered creatures way above their pay grade. In my Sword Coast Guard game, my player Trevor once had his character, a spellcaster I believe, sneak down into the crypts below Gauntlet Hall while the rest of the party distracted the Knights of Torm by pretending to want to join their order. This resulted in tension and anticipation, and I'm sure quite a bit of fear. It was actually lots of fun. Trevor provoked a fight with a construct that was mostly immune to his magic, and he had to flee for his life. It was the adrenaline rush you get when you skirt death and destruction, knowing that something horrible might just happen. And then, if they get out of it alive, which Trevor's character did, wow, the feeling of relief and jubilation is spectacular. So, maybe this is why players want to split the party? At the very least, it is one reason I don't adjust adventures when they do so. And now let's take a quick look at the Barbarian doing some stupid stuff because, well, nothing is more entertaining than watching a moron be a moron. La, la, la. La, la, la. La, la, la. Okay, I give up. What are you doing?
Well, playing with my dice collection, of course.
You mean that cheap plastic dice collection? Listen, you're never going to impress your friends with cheap plastic dice, no matter how large your collection. You need premium metal dice. You need ember dice.
Wait, ember dice? You mean the high quality metal dice that only the very bestest of RPG players and game masters use?
Indeed, high quality metal dice with unique, highly thematic designs. In fact, Ember Forge sent me an advanced copy of their Atlantean dice set.
Show me! Please, show me! Wow, these are really cool. They have like magic runes on them and stuff.
Indeed, Ember dice are meticulously crafted. They are quite literally works of art.
Wait, this one right here looks different.
Yes. That's a D20 from their Yggdrasil set.
Okay. Just tell me how I can get my own set of Ember dice, please.
Very well, but only if you promise to get rid of all those cheap plastic dice and only roll premium metal ember dice from this day hence.
Yeah, I swear.
Well, simply back the Ember Dice Kickstarter at the link below, and you too can be the proud owner of premium dice made from durable bronze alloys and designed to enthrall both you and your fellow players. Number 2, bad decisions. Speaking of my Sword Coast Guard group, they once decided to take on an entire castle full of enemies all at once. Okay, context. They wanted to sneak into the castle in order to headhunt the leaders and not have to fight anything. Well, on the way to the castle, they flubbed a skill challenge, and a patrol of orcs managed to sound their horn and alert the entire castle to the presence of intruders. This naturally put the entire castle on alert, and they began actively searching for these intruders. As a game master, I figured, hey, the solution is simple. Retreat and come back the next day or so when things have died down. But no, my players decided that there was no time like the present and pushed forward with the entire castle on alert. Now, they did manage to sneak into the castle itself, but it was only a matter of time before they ran into a group of orcs and battle ensued. And naturally, the enemies yelled out that they had found the intruders. They may have even sounded their own horn, which in turn caused many of the enemies, including the leaders, to converge upon the characters. So basically, my players took on an entire castle full of orcs and their powerful leaders all at once. Now your first reaction might be, gee, that sucks. But let me tell you, that game session was amazing. It was so much fun for all of us, and my players, they almost won. All of the orcs and characters were dead, except for one orc leader and one character, and they were duking it out one-on-one, toe-to-toe. It was super close, but the orc leader won and the last character fell. Now you may be saying, Luke, why didn't you just adjust the orcs' hit points or have them miss the PC or something? Why didn't you engineer it so the characters could win? Because that would have cheapened the experience, and it would have prevented the players from rolling up new characters who would then go back to the castle, trounce their foes, and ultimately win. You see, a revenge mission is tons of fun too. I've had a couple of them over my tenure as a game master, and they are amazing. By the way, if you'd like to watch the game session that they did all this crazy stuff, it's right here on my channel. The video is called Snagjaw Castle Part 2, and I'll try to throw a link down below for you. Number 3, leaving enemies alive behind you. And the players of my Hand of Light group have happily volunteered to serve as a case study for this next top reason for TPKs. I literally did not email them or ask them or anything, so this is kind of like the voluntold. Okay, they didn't volunteer. None of them know. I'm just gonna share this story because I'm nice like that. Anyway, if I remember correctly, because this was several years ago, they were down in some crypts searching for the captured mother of one of the characters. They ran across a group of undead, and the cleric used Turn Undead, which caused all of the undead to run in fear. The players were like, yay, we won, and then continued moving through the crypts. Of course, Turn Undead only lasts for like a minute or so, after which point the undead, who were being led by intelligent leaders, I want to add, began coming after the characters again, following them from behind. Now, some of the undead were playing musical instruments too, so I even told the players 2 or 3 times that they still heard the music behind them and that it seemed to be following them. So they knew something was up, but they continued to press forward. It was at this point that they ran into another encounter and battle began. On the second round or so, the musical undead arrived to their rear, and the characters found themselves sandwiched between 2 groups of enemies. Character after character began to drop, and the last living PC tried to flee and hide, but the baddies got him, and it was a TPK. The interesting thing is that this is a reoccurring theme I see in my games. There is a desire on the part of the players to bypass encounters and beeline for the boss or the objective, which is completely understandable. Like, why fight stuff when it can be avoided? However, those bypassed encounters aren't always dealt with in the best of ways that would better ensure that they don't become issues in the future. Instead, the thought is sometimes to circumvent mook encounters by any means necessary, and just hope and pray the enemies in them don't come back to bite you later. You see, as a game master, I'm not trying to stab my players in the back or screw them over, but I am trying to run realistic and believable games. And if bypassed encounters are not satisfactorily dealt with, I'm not just gonna handwave things. Like, those bad guys might come back later, especially once the heroes confront the boss sounds an alarm and calls for reinforcements. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please give me a thumbs up and leave a comment for the algorithm down below. Let us know what has caused TPKs for you in your game. I also dropped a link down below to the story of this TPK in the corresponding game session, which is called My Dear Missing Mother. But I don't recall which session it actually happened in. There are a whole bunch of those videos for that particular adventure, and you're gonna have to find the right one. Number 4, taking on multiple encounters at once. Now, technically, my previous 2 stories about my Sword Coast Guard group and Hand of Light group illustrate this point, but I also once had a player with a habit of opening doors when the group was already in the middle of a combat. This sometimes resulted in additional groups of enemies joining the battle, which caused the combat to become extremely challenging. Now, sometimes adventures are designed with this in mind. For instance, I often design things so that there are a few groups of enemies in nearby rooms, and starting battle with any one of them will cause the other baddies to arrive on the next round. But those encounters are designed that way, and the other encounters are just not meant to be taken on simultaneously, although it sometimes does happen. Now, in the particular case of this player who went around opening doors in the middle of combat, he was actively trying to wake up additional encounters and bring them down on the group. Now, I didn't even realize this until my buddy Joe came to me and was like, "Hey Luke, you know he's doing that on purpose because he's upset and wants to screw us over, right?" So yeah, I had a conversation. Oh, and by the way, why was he upset? Well, he was upset because he was a power gamer and we frequently told him no to many of the shenanigans he wanted to do. So anyway, he was upset at us and this was his way of getting revenge, I suppose? I don't know. But anyway, I had a conversation with that player, and let us just say that there were no more opening of doors in the middle of combat. So what's my point? Sometimes TPKs happen because there is a nefarious actor in your midst, and that's not cool and must needs be dealt with. Number 5, lack of teamwork. And now we shall turn to my youngling group, a group of teenagers I run a game for, to illustrate this point. They were tracking down a criminal known as the Black Mage, who was a CR-15 Skull Lord, a creature that would have certainly been a challenge for them. They confronted the Black Mage, and 2 of the players were trying to convince him not to fight. They were trying to convince him to take one of the characters as his queen. That was literally their ploy. I'm not sure how that would have helped them fulfill their contract to apprehend the criminal, but they stuck with it. In fact, so determined were they that even after the battle with the Black Mage began, instead of fighting, they continued trying to convince him. Meanwhile, the other 2 players were fighting back because they knew the gig was up. So here we had the Black Mage laying down cones of cold, cloud kill, and other nasty spells, and 2 players were still engaged in diplomacy, and the other 2 were doing their best to fight back and not die. Finally, 2 of the players, the ones who were actually fighting, saw the writing on the wall and decided to flee, leaving the other 2 players who still weren't fighting behind to die, which they did in short order. You can't make this stuff up, man. It's crazy. It's those hilarious, awesome stories that happen as part of RPGs. It's amazing stuff. Of course, the Black Mage had access to the spell Dimension Door, which he used to cut off the 2 fleeing characters. And that was my youngling group's first TPK. Now, one might point out that several things went wrong here, but ultimately it came down to a lack of teamwork against a powerful foe. And by the way, they all made new characters that they loved and we kept on playing and everybody was cool with it, right? Death doesn't have to be a catastrophe. It's just part of the game. You recover, you move on, and you have fun with a new character. Okay, great. So we know that taking on multiple encounters or an entire castle all at once could lead to a TPK. But what if you want to run a mass combat in your D&D game? Well, we all know that the core rules do not work very well for that. However, if you watch this video right here, I explain how to run a mass combat or siege in a way that actually works.